So, what an honor to welcome you to the Handshake podcast, Tami Simon. And as we say in Ireland, Céad Míle Fáilte Rót, 100,000 welcomes to you to this podcast. Let's begin. How do I do you justice in introducing you and introducing our listeners to this global trailblazer in spiritual wisdom and conscious leadership? I'll just try my best, and I'll ask you to come in and finish it off. Tami is the visionary founder of Sounds True, a groundbreaking multimedia publishing house she established in 1985 with a bold mission to disseminate spiritual wisdom and foster personal transformation. As the host of the acclaimed Insights at the Edge podcast, Tami has created a space for profound conversations with some of the world's most innovative and influential teachers, offering listeners insights that challenge, inspire, and ignite personal growth. And finally, Tami, your leadership extends to the Inner MBA, a pioneering study program built on 7 key orienting principles, as you name them, designed to help individuals and organizations embrace conscious leadership and achieve their absolute potential and growth. Would you like to add anything to that introduction, Tami? Have I covered it all?
I think you've covered quite a lot, and just that it's a joy to be in your shelter here. It's a joy to be with you.
Thank you so much. And I remember listening to a lot of your work along the way, and one thing stuck with me. You did say at one stage, the human species is on the line. We each have to give everything we've got. And it is with that sentiment that I enter this conversation with you. So we look at purpose and legacy first. Your journey with Sounds True has been described as a calling rather than a business. How do you define your personal legacy, and what do you hope will endure long after you have left the helm? And I do realize that you have departed from CEO of Sounds True in recent past. What is the legacy that you hope you will leave?
I'm going to answer that, but I first want to just make one comment about something you said as you were completing your introduction of me. You shared about giving everything we've got at this time. And what I want to say about that is that giving everything that we have can happen right in our sphere of influence, right where we are at any moment. It's not necessarily some notion of some large scale impact effort. It doesn't have to be that. Giving everything that we are and that we have is a type of offering of our care, our concern, our creativity by reaching out to someone who's near us in our home or a neighbor and simply saying a kind thing. That can be giving everything we have. It's not holding back our love, our heart from pouring out of us in every day of our life. So that's what I mean. And when you ask about my legacy and what I think, and that's not really how I focus my energy. I don't have some plan that, like, after I die, this is what will happen. And these are the waves of impact that will occur beyond my lifetime. And I don't think that way. I think about this moment right here. I'm meeting you for the first time. Am I wholly here? Am I tuning in to who your listeners are? Can I feel them right now?
So
can I say something right now that will be helpful and lift people up? I don't think we know what our impacts are on other people. Sometimes something very small turns out to be really huge in another person's life. And
Yeah.
sometimes the huge goals and things that we go after end up being empty. I don't think any of that's the point. I think the point is our faithfulness. And I'll speak for myself, my fidelity
Mhm.
to the expression of my soul, the
Mhm.
honoring of my soul, and its expression in all parts of my life, which of course include my work. Now, you mentioned this notion of calling,
Mhm.
and I do think that a calling is different than a career or your job path or your job plan. And a calling is that thing that you can't quit.
Mhm.
You can't, you can't.
Mhm.
You can't. There's something in it. You'll give everything for it. And that's the way in my life I have felt about the original mission of Sounds True, disseminating spiritual wisdom, which is connecting people to something beyond our separateness that exists underneath our essential
Mhm.
nature as being.
But
So
I
that's
put
my
it to you,
job.
it's not everybody who identifies their calling or responds to that calling. Would you
Well,
agree?
first of all, these are two very different things. So one, the identifying, and the
Yes,
second, the
is
responding.
responding.
So the first, quote unquote, identifying, it's more like, can you feel yourself being tapped on the shoulder? That would be one way.
Mhm.
Or can you sit quietly
Mhm.
enough
Mhm.
and you just know this thing? It's interesting. I was talking to my wife the other day because I had done an interview with a para-Olympic swimmer, a woman named Jessica Long, who's
Right.
won 30 gold Paralympic medals. And she was the one who, actually, they weren't all gold. She won 30 medals, and a
Medals,
portion
yeah.
of them were gold medals. And she was the one who said, "What's that thing that you won't quit on?" And I shared that with my wife. This is very personal. And she then shared, remember when in the movie Brokeback Mountain,
Right.
when one of the gentlemen said to the other one, "I can't quit you. I just can't quit you." And I'm quoting that. And the reason I'm
Yes.
saying this is because it's about love.
Chris.
Somehow we identify that with a person.
Mhm.
Like we're able to say with a person, "I can't quit you." But
Mhm.
we're not as readily able to identify in our normal human way of talking about things
Mhm.
when we can't quit an idea, when we can't
Yeah.
quit a sense of purpose,
Mhm.
when there's something that just keeps coming back again and again. And I'm saying that because you mentioned this word identify. And it's
Yes.
not like you look at 10,000 people and you identify the person that you're going to love through some kind of weird analytical process and
Mm.
you run it through an assessment
Mm.
machine. It's not
Sure.
like that. It's
Mhm.
something takes you over and you can't stop dreaming about them. They're haunting you.
You.
They've
Right.
got you. And I
Mhm.
think it's the same thing
Mhm.
with a calling.
You call it.
Something captivates us. And we have to we have to just be open enough. It's not an analytical process. It's an openness. And then we are captivated
Mhm.
and we know it. We know it just like we know love. We can't shake it. And
Mhm.
then the second part that you said, following it. Well, that takes a lot of courage. It
Absolutely.
takes courage. It
Mhm.
took courage for me even to bring out this line of Brokeback Mountain. Am I going to be like off center with your listeners? What am I
I
doing? What am
know.
I talking about?
I
Why
know.
am I going there? But it's the courage to be yourself.
Yes.
This is what I love. This is what I love. When I started Sounds True, it was before a term like mindfulness was even part of our
Our
vocabulary. I was
vocabulary. Yes.
talking about quote unquote spiritual wisdom.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
believe me, plenty of people thought that I was off on some, esoteric sideline. It
Sure.
didn't matter to me. The people that I held up inside myself were the great mystics from history.
Mhm.
And I thought they're my quote unquote inspirational role
Inspiration.
models.
Yeah, right.
These people who were willing to be on the outskirts of society
Mhm.
in order to be
Mhm.
true to something that they felt inside. And then who knew that, 20 years later, a word like mindfulness. First of all, it started with yoga. When I first started
Mhm.
Sounds True in 1985, people doing yoga were considered those freaks on the sidewalk chanting like Hare Krishnas. Yoga wasn't
Absolutely.
popular. And then
Mhm.
yoga became part of the culture and accepted as
Mhm.
a way that we exercise, but really underneath yoga is a deep
Deep
philosophy, and
philosophy, of
there
course.
is meditation that
Mhm.
people, and then through
Mhm.
people's access, suddenly mindfulness, and now here we are, mindfulness in business, the
Mhm.
mindful leader. This is all an evolution
Mhm.
that occurred, but I had this center line in me from the beginning. And I never knew if what I was doing would become popular. That didn't matter. It was mine to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Certain vulnerability in it all too, isn't there? But you just uh, move, create the ripple effect, and move with it.
The vulnerability, I think, comes as you described in the following of your calling
Mhm.
and the courage that I named. What is
Mhm.
that courage? Well, when you put yourself out,
Mhm.
you will be rejected.
Of course.
Some may accept you, but
Mhm.
others will reject you. There's a conscious marketing teacher who's part of the inner MBA, and he talks about the art of repulsion because people often talk and write about the art of attraction but the
Mhm.
art of repulsion, as the way he describes it, I think it's kind of funny, but I think it's also an important teaching as we put ourselves out there in the world is that a group of people will be repelled by
Mhm.
you claiming your vision and holding true
Mhm.
to it. They will not like it and they will criticize you. And if you're not repelling some people, you're not hitting the mark. So that's a lot of the vulnerability. It's
Mhm.
painful to be
Mhm. Mhm.
rejected. That's painful, but that's a small price to pay ultimately for being true to your soul.
Something great, of course. It brings to mind a phrase, the courage to be disliked as well, And,
Yes.
you know, but in today's fast-paced world, people often prioritize success over significance. So how do you help people realign with a deeper sense of purpose? And how do you maintain this alignment yourself?
Well, I think one thing, first of all, is what is your definition of success?
Mhm.
And who are you trying to be significant for? So I think
Mhm.
these things we have to take them out of the status quo's culture
Mhm.
definition.
Mhm.
If success is having a lot of money, but
Yeah,
being miserable, or having the trophy partner, but being unhappy
I'm
in your
happy.
marriage
Sure.
on the inside, what kind of success is that? It's not any kind of success that I want.
Mhm.
What is significance? What does that mean? To whom? To what?
Mhm.
For what?
Mhm.
I don't know. That feels to me like something that lives in the eyes of other people. The
Beyond your
kinds
head.
of words and the values that are important to me are things like fidelity. That's an important
Mhm.
word. Faithfulness to myself, inner alignment, giving my soul's gifts, expressing myself, loving,
Sure.
connecting, caring, being really healthy and healthy at every level,
Mhm.
having the people who know me best, they're the ones that I want to have say these beautiful and glorious things about me
Sure.
and mean it and not be
Mhm.
like, well, really, if you really knew what was really going on with her when she
I know.
wasn't on the microphone. And so
Mhm.
I think it begins, first of all, with knowing our values,
Sure. And honoring them.
claiming them. and honoring them and
Right.
being willing to make sacrifices to honor them. And so in terms of what I think it takes, I think we have to examine our mindset as well, because people have ideas. And this is one of the things I've discovered in the inner MBA. People come in and they're like, well, if I'm true to my values, I can't make a lot of money. I can't do both at the same time. Why not? In fact, I would really question that. I would question that and say that often people who are tremendously successful out in the world are those people who have had the courage to stick with a calling that they really care about and give everything to it. They didn't have to necessarily sacrifice financial success or influence of other people. So I think we have to question some of the ideas we have. Another idea that I found people brought to the inner MBA that really needs to be examined, and I discovered that I had some of this myself, and I had to really take it apart, was if I value the well-being of all of my staff and employees and give them the time they need to take good care of themselves and prioritize health and well-being for the staff, that's going to cost financially, and it's going to end up hurting the company. That's a false polarization. In fact, if you don't value your employee health and well-being, they won't stay, and your burned out employees will find ways to not be as creative and innovative as they could be, because they don't have the energy and the innovative dreams pouring through them. When you do take care of people, it comes back and benefits the company.
Of course it does, in terms of engagement and everything.
Yeah, so I think we have to question some of these either-ors.
Ideas that we have, absolutely. But in terms of, one of the concepts central to the handshake is the importance of harmonizing the personal, the professional, and the organizational values that we have. What's been the most challenging for you in aligning your personal mission with the business missions at Sounds True?
That's a good question. What has been the hardest?
What has been the most challenging for you in aligning your personal mission with the business mission of Sounds True?
Yeah. Well, I worked with a coach at one point, and he was helping us with some organizational structural challenges. And he said to me, Tami, the challenge you have is you have too much empathy. And I was like, what? I have too much empathy? Really? I don't think that's true. Is that true? But I do think there are ways that sometimes I cared too much and have cared too much about people's feelings, because I am an empathic person who can feel sometimes what other people are feeling. And as a result, I didn't prioritize the business needs and interests. I prioritized what I thought would please them and made the wrong decisions in certain situations.
It's a learning journey, though, isn't it? It's a learning journey to reach the middle point, to get the balance.
Yes, it is. And I think it also requires really strong boundaries, and something that this gentleman said, which was to care and not to care. And that's a hard one, but I think I ended up, and there's many ways you can say this, and maybe that was just the way that he said it. But I think that, and I think maybe a more brilliant way to say it would be that putting the organization's health always right at the center, and not any individual's experience. But I think that's been a learning for me to grow in that way.
And I suppose we all put our own stamp on how we are in the organization, what we bring. So you bringing your personal to bear on the organization over time shapes it and seeps right through to the culture of the organization, doesn't it?
I think that's true with anything we
Mhm.
do. Our
Mhm.
DNA, our personal fingerprints are all over whatever we create, whether it's a room in our office or our house,
Mhm.
our kitchen, whatever it might be, let alone our organization.
Mhm.
Yes, our fingerprints are everywhere.
It's a very soulful thing, isn't it? It's our soul. We're bringing our whole being to the endeavor, and when done with consistency.
We have that opportunity to do
Mhm.
that and to
Of
do it
course.
in a beautiful, and to keep using that
Mhm.
word, soulful
Mhm.
way
Mhm.
that people touch it and they feel the warmth. They can feel
Absolutely.
that, and that possibility exists.
Mhm. As I say, you can smell it when you arrive into an
Yes,
organization.
you
Absolutely.
can.
So, what do you think are the most critical practices to ensure genuine connection and trust among remote and dispersed teams, as we've seen in a post-COVID world, or even during COVID, and but since then, remote and dispersed teams?
Sure. Well, I think the principles really are the same, whether you're in person or you're remote and you're online. You're
Mhm.
remote, you're online, people are still, they're hearing your voice. They're
Mhm.
seeing you over Zoom.
Mhm.
They're sensing your
Mhm.
humanity. And I
Mhm.
think one of the things it begins with is your own congruence. Because just like you can feel and sense a quality of soul in an organization as soon as you step in the door and you can in a physical space,
Mhm.
as soon as you get online with someone and you hear them speak and you see their smile, you can
Sure.
tell, are they hiding something? What are they
Sure.
hiding?
Sure.
Are they being real with me?
Mhm.
Are they here? Are they present? Are they really here, or are they distracted? Are they on their
Mhm.
phone doing something else while we're having a
Mhm.
meeting? Like,
Mhm.
what are
Mhm.
they doing? Are they looking down? Are they looking up?
Mhm.
Are their shoulders up at their ears, or are they down, and is their
Yes.
heart
Sure.
forward and center? So our body language, just as we know if we're in a meeting with someone, a
Mhm.
portion of the communication is the words we use, but the
Right.
majority of the communication
It's it.
is
Facial
other
expression.
ways. It's our facial expressions, it's our
Mhm.
tone of voice,
Mhm.
it's our posture, it's everything. It's the handshake that we
Mhm.
lead with. What does it feel like? Is it
Mhm.
warm and soft? What is it? And
Mhm.
so the way we engender trust,
Sure.
which is, as we know, the key to psychological safety
Of
in
course.
teams, what
Mhm.
brings out the best in other people, is
Mhm.
first of all to be trustworthy. What makes us trustworthy is to be
Mhm.
congruent. What I mean by
Mhm.
congruent is that the words I use and the
Mhm.
way that I am are in alignment, they're in sync. I
Sure.
don't I my empl people I'm working with, they don't need to guess, "What's really going on with Tami?"
Mhm.
She
Mhm.
says she says she's doing really well today, but I can tell that something's bothering her, and she won't even
Mhm.
say it, and what's happening, and
Mhm.
she says everything's fine with the company, but what's really happening? Because it doesn't feel like everything's
Sure.
fine. Why is she So, when we lead with truthfulness, what we say and how we feel, that's
Mm.
huge. And it
Nothing. Yeah.
also invites people
Yes.
to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
present and truthful with
Mhm.
us. So, what that means is we can have a check in when we start a meeting and say, I have a lot going on right now, and I'm not comfortable talking about it.
Mhm.
I'm not comfortable talking about it right now, but I just want you to know
Mhm.
that I'm in a process
Sure.
right now around something that's happening personally.
Mhm.
And what I've found is that when a leader is willing to go first and share and be vulnerable, then other people take their cue
They set the
from that
tone.
leader. They
Yes,
set the tone. And before you
absolutely.
know it, everybody is being genuine in the space. And there's a quality of relatedness
Sure.
that comes from that, and trust. I trust these people. They have my back and I have their back.
Sure. And I think for many who met maybe online when working on, be it on Zoom or Teams or whatever, and later met person to person, face to face, and they just continued the conversation, it was proof of the effectiveness of working online as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But the interim BA, that's when I really tasted this whole sense of authenticity and meeting others. Who the one constant that came through to me and the people I met through the inner MBA was the desire to make a difference, their desire to do good. And the inner MBA is a world-class faculty, a partnership between LinkedIn and Wisdom 2.0. And you mentioned the 7 orienting principles for being a spiritual entrepreneur. Which of these has been challenging for you to embody in your own life and work? And how have you worked through that challenge?
Well, it's interesting that you're using the word challenge, because one of the principles has to do with how we respond to challenges.
Absolutely.
And, interestingly, Melissa Bernstein,
Mhm.
she's the uh, entrepreneur in residence at the
Mhm.
Inner MBA. And she started a company called Melissa and Doug Toys, which
That's
grew to
right.
be
Yes.
north of $1 billion in
Hmm.
value. And now she's started another company called Lifelines,
Hmm.
which creates these sensory immersion objects that you can use in your life, like a pen that lets off a special
And
essential oil while
oh,
you
very good.
write with the pen. And so
Hmm.
she's very creative, very brilliant woman. She just sent me a report this morning that was issued about the mental health of entrepreneurs and how 93% of founders report being under mental health stress and strain
Hmm.
to increasing degrees, and that the number one quality that they have had to develop to be successful as founders of organizations is resilience.
Yes, of course.
More important than creative problem
Hmm.
solving,
Hmm.
more
Hmm.
important than management and leadership is their own resilience to the challenges
Yeah.
that their businesses face. So,
Yeah.
as a principal, do we know how to be the kind of people who can face very difficult things that are happening and get
Mhm.
back up? George Mumford, who's written a book called The Mindful Athlete, talks
Right.
about how an athlete needs to focus on their next move. What's
Sure.
the next move? You can't
Mhm.
sit there and fret about the shot that you missed. You can't do that.
Mhm.
You've got to go make the next shot. That's
Sure.
it. You
Yes.
can't look back. So, in
Mhm.
terms of my own growth, and this
Mhm.
has been the growth that I've gone through as a person and in
Mhm.
dramatic ways throughout my life.
Sure.
I am a high achiever, and as part of being a high achiever, something that has been part of my psyche is also having a very loud inner critic,
Mhm.
very loud, very severe inner critic, pushing me all the time. You could even say sort of whipping me.
How do you
And
keep
that,
manners on that inner critic?
what's that?
How do you keep manners on that inner critic?
What I would say is that that type of inner critic can keep someone, when difficult things happen, from
Yeah.
focusing on the next move,
Ah.
because they're using a lot of their inner energy
Hmm.
to punish themselves.
Sure.
That's not helpful.
Not at
That's
all.
not
That's not
good.
what you're saying.
That's not going to get us where we're going. So
Hmm.
my journey as a person over the last 40 years in business and as an adult is to learn a whole set of skills and insights to understand what's this inner critic really doing inside of me. And a key is really developing self-compassion. So it's one thing, we're so compassionate towards other people, but
Others.
can we direct that to ourselves? Can we treat ourselves like we would a friend who's suffering and say the same kinds of helpful and inspiring things we would say to a friend? Can we understand, what is this inner critic trying to do in my life? It's trying to protect me from a certain kind of pain or humiliation or embarrassment. Could I handle that so well, know it so well, develop a kind of confidence that I can be with whatever that shame-filled feeling is and move through it, that I don't need to spend time punishing myself. I can just get on with the next move that's
Sure.
needed here to help my business be successful.
I think it's the pace of change these days. You bring to mind Lisa Lahey's work on the immunity to change mapping, which I've used extensively in my own work. And I think the leadership bench is shrinking because of the fear of burnout. Really, in a lot of in a real sense, because it's to be able to field that change and to have the adaptability to be able to field the amount of change coming at leaders in today's world.
And if you can imagine, if you're busy punishing and criticizing yourself because the industry has changed and now you need to reinvent your organization. Oh, it's my fault that I need to reinvent my organization. No, it's not. We're all reinventing
I
our
know,
organizations.
absolutely.
COVID hit us and shifted. Some companies grew during COVID and then shrunk afterwards. Other
Sure.
companies during COVID itself had to re-entrench and then find their way afterwards. Yes, the level of acceleration is challenging all of us. Can we see these challenges as an input that's honing our capacities, that's sharpening our sword, that's making us bigger and better and more capable and more creative and more able? We have to find a way to look at it. And this is a really simple way of looking at challenges, but we choose to go to a gym and lift weights of different sizes, or some of us do, or have, okay, I'm going to take the next weight then. But somehow when challenges come to us in a business, it's like this terrible thing that has happened. And it can be terrible. It can be hard. But if we can look at it more like, okay, now I have a much bigger weight I need to lift. And I'm an athlete. I'm an organizational athlete.
You bring to mind Javon McCormick, character I met on the Inner MBA. He wrote The Modern Leader, and he talked about modern problems demanding modern solutions. And this moment demands a modern leader, and to lead for the future, not the past. These are words, the lines that come to me from his book, which he wrote on the modern leader. But that whole thing of being open to lifelong learning is so important, wouldn't you think? Our
Well,
learning never
indeed.
finishes.
In whatever role we are, in whatever part of life we're in, I mean, learning is, for me, it's a type, and I think for many people, it's something we just inherently love.
Sure.
Just like we love other things in our life. There's a immediate kind of reward
Of course.
when we learn something new. I think one of the keys to not burning out at work is finding a type of job where the learning that's involved with that job is something you love. Because then you'll just do it, because you would do it anyway. You would just do it anyway, because I like to learn. I like to, this is the thing I like to learn.
Yeah. The thing I love about the Inner MBA is that balance, the balance of the exposure to the different learnings, but also to the mindfulness practices.
Yeah, when it comes to mindfulness, there's a lot of ways to talk about it. But I think one of the key ideas, and it's really where the inner MBA starts, is disidentifying from being the thinker. I'm a thinker. That's how I identify. That's the core of who I am. Well, what if the core of who we each are is, and I'm going to, awareness, space, openness, in which thoughts arise, in which emotions arise, everything. But we're a bigger space. The example, the metaphor that people use is often we identify with being a cloud instead of the open space of the sky. And a cloud is moving, it's changing, our thoughts change, our positions on issues change, all kinds of things change. If we can be that bigger space that we all know when our thoughts quiet for a moment. We all know that. We all have that sense. Then when thoughts come, even the thoughts like I shouldn't have done X, Y, Z, this or that, we also know, oh, they're going to subside. I can rest and I can have this kind of openness that allows me to entertain a lot of different perspectives, even perspectives that are oppositional to what I originally thought. So I came in and I had this very, rigid mindset about something. I don't need to hold on to that. I can instead open up. I can be the sky for this moment.
That's one thing certainly that the inner MBA achieves in that.
I'm very happy if that is part of the core notion. I remember working with someone for a long time, and this was early on at Sounds True. And he was a pretty rigid thinker, and it was either this or that. And he had this epiphany at one point that two opposing things could be true at the same time. He discovered the nature of paradox. And I was like, oh, this is so amazing. Certain things are paradoxical, and we have to be willing to embrace that paradox in a situation, seeing that two opposing things could be true at the same time in order to move forward and get beyond our divisiveness.
Which brings me to a question. Sounds True. Was that just one moment of inspiration? You said, yes, this is the title. This is the name. This is the name for my book.
No, it wasn't. I wish it was that simple, but originally, and I was going to call the company, you ready for this? It's a little embarrassing now in retrospect, but I wanted to call the company Crystal Sound. And the reason back in the mid 1980s was that I would sit sometimes with a crystal in my hand. I would hold the crystal and I would just meditate with a crystal in my hand. And that's when crystals were popular. And I thought, they're clear, they're sharp, they're precise, they hold and encode history the way that rocks and minerals do. And each cassette at the time, because remember we're back in the 80s, each cassette will be like a crystal. This is what I thought. And we had a logo that was made that had a beautiful crystal in the center and sound waves. Okay. And then I went to register the name at the local Boulder County cleric's office, and they said, we have a mobile DJ unit that has the name Crystal Sounds. And so this is too close. You can't use the name. And, I'm 22 years old at the time. So I was devastated. I was like, wow, what am I going to do? And then I wrote a letter. I was writing a long letter to a professor from Swarthmore College when I was a religious studies major. And his name's Gunapala Dharmasiri, lives in Sri Lanka. And I was explaining to him the purpose of this new organization that I wanted to start. And as I was writing to him, the words Sounds True came out as I was writing. And I thought, that's clever. That's interesting. And what I liked about it was that as somebody who is audio sensitive, which I am. I'm just very sensitive to sounds. I somehow knew from an early age I could hear when someone was hiding something or lying or kind of I could hear something about it. And I could also hear when there was some quality in someone that sounded true. And when I could heard people as a young child who sounded true, I felt safe. I
Sure.
felt safe versus feeling like vigilant and on guard and what's
But
really going on here.
It gets it so well. It's lovely and simple, but it gets it. Sounds true.
Mhm.
You know. Anyway, you have been referred to as the spiritual entrepreneur. How do you handle the tension between maintaining profitability and staying true to spiritual and ethical values in the business world? How do you
Look,
find
it's hard to maintain profitability, period. Let's just start there, period. It's hard to have a profitable business, a
Yes.
business with good margins. It is hard. Let's just take that on as
Yes.
its own extraordinarily hard challenge.
Sure.
Whatever your values are, whatever, I mean, how many businesses survive beyond the 5-year point?
Of course.
So remarkably small number. So it's extraordinarily hard to have a profitable business. And you have to be smart about it, really smart. And you
Yes.
have to look at your numbers and get good counsel. And it's very simple. Make sure that your costs are lower than your revenue and that you have good cash flow as well. Like, do you have a good positive cash flow business or the ability to have? So that is hard. Okay. Now add in spiritual principles. I think it makes it easier, not harder. It makes it easier. People mistake this notion that, oh, the spiritual principles.
You can't have both.
It's crazy. First of all, just admit how hard it is to run a profitable business. Figure out how are you going to do it. You better make sure you're delivering a lot of value to people. Because if you're delivering a lot of value, people will pay for it. There will be a flow of revenue. Now bring in spiritual principles. What are spiritual principles? I'm going to tell the truth. Well, that's good. If you tell the truth, you won't end up crossing the boundary with the law. Okay, I'm going to honor the people I work with and treat them the way I would like to be treated. A core spiritual principle. Well, if you treat people the way you would like to be treated, they may work for you for many years. They may give extra and be extra good. If you share the rewards of your profitable business, another quote unquote spiritual principle, people will be inspired. They'll make your business better and better. So I think spiritual principles, the way I'm describing it, truth telling, treat other people the way you would want to be treated, share the rewards of your company's success, they make your already designed to be profitable business better.
Yeah. So that's your advice to the modern day leader, really, isn't it? To find that center ground.
I think that is good advice. And you have to have, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be a founder, develop your capacities for resilience. Be able to get up each day, every hour, and know what's the next move and be capable of delivering that next move because the challenges are intense and accelerating.
Do you see any limits? What are the limits of spirituality in business, in modern day business?
There are no limits. I mean, I think some of it becomes like, how do you define spirituality? My own definitions are things like embodying the virtues in every way. What are the limits to that? There are no limits.
No limits. Yeah. So if you come at it with heart and with authenticity and consistency, it will just flow.
Well, and as I said, have a profitable design for your business. Make sure the business fundamentals are well and in place, because otherwise you're going to think, oh, it's because I did this or I did that the company didn't work. But no, your business fundamentals weren't right. So you
Yes.
have to make sure. And, I think what's interesting is sometimes people, they don't embrace learning the business fundamentals, accepting them, getting advice and counsel and education on that. Have an inner MBA, but also have knowledge and skill in business fundamentals and bring those together. That's the winning
Get the
formula.
foundations right. Yeah. Sounds true has influenced a shift in how we think about well-being and personal growth. Do you think society is truly more receptive to spirituality and introspection now? Or is it just something of a trend in the wellness industry?
To be honest with you, Teresa, and I don't mean this to be rude, but I can't care.
Mm,
Like, is it a trend? Is it this? Like, this is how I think
I see. Yeah.
people of conscience who are concerned about each other and the world and ethics need to work in the business arena, whether it's popular or it's not popular.
Mhm.
Really, I
Mhm.
can't be concerned with that.
I
I'm
know.
sorry. I hope that doesn't sound rude, but
Not at all. Not at all.
it's like, are the virtues in fashion? I don't know.
The acid test is the authenticity and the heart you bring to it. So, in your decades of leading Sounds True, what has surprised you the most about the journey of spiritual entrepreneurship?
How hard it is.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I knew how hard it was, well, I mean, as you said, what's the thing you can't quit? I didn't know how hard it would be. I
Mhm.
didn't know how much the company would have to be reinvented again
Mhm.
and again and again. I didn't know the kinds of employee challenges and culture challenges we would face. I didn't know how much would be asked of me in a relentless way. I didn't know how hard it would be.
And did you ever come to a point of self-doubt in that journey?
I wouldn't exactly say self-doubt, but uh, Julie, my partner, said to me once, "Your relationship with Sounds True reminds me of a couple who get right to that point where they think about saying, maybe we should just get divorced." And then they fall in love with each other all over again and they keep going. And so, have there been
Very
those
good.
times when it's just been like, oh God, really? But then there's this tremendous power of renewal and it's
Of
a new
course.
marriage again and
Mhm.
again and again. It changes. It's not the
Yeah.
same marriage it was. It goes through all these different phases.
And strengthens in the process.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, in a world facing urgent global challenges, can spirituality make a measurable difference on a societal scale?
What else could?
Absolutely.
What else could? And a lot of this gets into what is the definition of spirituality? Like,
Right.
what is that?
Mhm.
And I think it's an interesting word that brings up for people. Is it their, love of some external God? Like, is it,
Mm.
to me, it's our essential nature. It's our essential nature that all human beings share. Our goodness, our care for each other, our strength, our resilience, this inner nature underneath everything, all the thoughts and ideas and emotions, underneath this core quality of loving presence. Can loving presence make a difference? Can it make a difference interpersonally? First of all, start with yourself. Can loving presence make a difference with yourself? Can you
Of
feel
course. Of
yourself
course.
pervaded
Mhm.
with another, with a
Mhm.
group, with a
Mhm.
world challenge? What else could make the hugest difference than
And
loving
as the
presence?
world becomes more and more complicated and a lot of things are unraveling, that whole concept is becoming so much more important and even harder to hold on to. It's challenging people to really hold on to that loving presence, isn't it?
We have to triple down on it. My own prayer right now for myself is steadfast and true.
Mhm. Yeah. So as you look forward, what do you believe that trust and collaboration will look like in the future workspace?
Trust and collaboration. Well, trust and collaboration happens every time you're working one person, two person, three people,
Mhm.
and whatever the workspace is, I think people are going to demand more authenticity, more truthfulness, and
Mhm.
that people are going to be more willing to engage in collaboration because we have to. We have
And
to.
absolutely, and that really rings true for me in my interest in AI, the galloping pace of AI, and we're bound for singularity. So it's becoming more and more important that we hold on to what it means to be human.
Let us each do that.
Mhm. So, what impact are your international learning offers, such as mediation practices and the inner MBA studies, what are they having in countries across the globe?
I'd love to hear more reports on that. I think
Mhm.
I'm not sure, although more and more I'm asked to be on international podcasts and receiving invitations, and our international audience is growing, but
Mhm.
I'm not sure of what all the impacts are.
Mhm. In my experience being based in Ireland and connecting with people from all over the world, it was just fascinating. It was brilliant, brilliant. And I've created friendships and actually gotten on planes to meet people that I've
Oh,
met in
wonderful.
the
It's
BA.
wonderful.
Yeah, but yeah, it is a piece of work. It would be a wonderful study for somebody to undertake to gather
It would
that
be.
information, you know? So looking ahead, how do you envision the future of business integrating spiritual and inner values? Do you foresee more leaders gravitating towards these principles, or do you believe the current business structures will resist this shift? You know, that emphasis on profitability and the bottom line. Will that win out?
Well, once again, as I said, these practices will increase
Sure.
profitability and the bottom line.
Yes.
And I think that's the education and the data
Sure.
that needs to be held up and understood and respected. Because once again, this whole notion that the inner well-being is at opposite to financial flourishing. This is a false notion.
False
One of the
dichotomy.
CEOs that is featured in the Inner MBA is a gentleman named Steve McAdam,
Yes.
who was the CEO of a $1 billion+ public manufacturing company. And their company dedicated themselves to a dual bottom line
Mhm.
performance. So one bottom line was their financial bottom line. This is a public company. It's
Mhm.
about the financial performance on the stock exchange.
Sure.
That's one bottom line. But he described the second bottom line as human flourishing, flourishing at work. How much were his employees growing?
Mine.
How much was their self-awareness increasing? And he saw that the two together is what created the most success for the entirety of the business,
Sure.
including their financial performance. So I think that, first of all, this information needs to be more readily available. It breaks open this entrenched patriarchal idea
Yes.
that power over people and success at the
Mm.
top for a few, that this is the way to create long-lasting, sustainable wealth. And I'm here to tell you it's not the way that will do it long-term, because long-term, people will not be satisfied. They won't stick with it. They won't stick with you. This is what we saw when people said, we're moving away from companies, the mass exit, and employees saying, no way. You look at the statistics around lack of employee engagement. What's underneath those statistics? So do I think the future of business is an integrated future where human values are held up at the center right along with profitability? Yes, I think it's inevitable that that's where we're going.
And I think Gen Z coming up the line are demanding it more and more.
Yeah, or they'll just work for themselves and, they won't do it.
Absolutely. So to conclude, Tami, what would you consider to be some of the most important connections we each can make with ourselves to bring the value of integrity, trust, and connection to our work and to communities?
First of all, believe it's possible. Get out of this notion where you've put yourself in the trash can before you've even started because you've bought into a false narrative about what's possible. Embrace this possibility. Secondly, whatever it is you can't quit, you can't quit it. You love it so much. Let yourself love what you love. Let yourself love who you love, the ideas you love, the projects you love, the impacts that you can't let go of. Let yourself really love it, because we will give and do and sacrifice for what we love. And then follow the breadcrumb trail. When we love like that, there are breadcrumbs that the universe puts down for us. Call this person, read this book, go to this group, do something. Follow the breadcrumb trail. Listen, observe, see, and then have the courage to put yourself out there, to make the phone call, to ask the quote unquote beginner's mind question that says, I'm looking at this totally differently. I think I might sound stupid, but I'd like to ask this question. It might be a stupid question, but I'd love to know what you think about it. And then listen. Be willing to sacrifice. The root of the word sacrifice is sacred. There's a willingness to give before you receive. Give first. Give first. Trust that it's a long game and that it may be a while, but you will succeed if you stick with it. So those are some of the ideas that occur to me.
What wonderful advice to anybody starting out or anybody who's beginning to question their impact or the meaning of their leadership. Tami, thank you so much for coming on the Handshake, and I've really enjoyed our conversation, meeting you, and I look forward to maybe future conversations around this and other topics.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for your good work
and so much.
Everything you bring to it. Thank you so much.